All right. Well, we're excited about today's discussion. We are joined today by Victoria Feather, who is the regional counsel for Capital Title of Texas for Austin and San Antonio. And then we are also joined today by Cindy Mokry. She is the VP of Operations for Austin and San Antonio with Capital Title of Texas. And our discussion today is, I think, a very interesting one. And I think it's something that a lot of people do not know about. It's kind of like the game of telephone. Somebody says one thing about this and it just kind of gets blown out of proportion. But we're going to talk today about the NAR settlement agreement and kind of the specifications of it. Now, for people who are listening that do not know what NAR is, it's the National Association of Realtors. And this is going to be surrounding the situation with compensation for buyer's agents all across the U.S. Now, every state is different, right? Every state's different with how their real estate laws and regulations are. But as a whole, this is this is a change that will affect, everyone in the U.S. So I guess the biggest thing to start with, and I guess I'll start with you, Victoria, and Cindy, please feel free to chime in. But I think people don't even know what's going on. What is this settlement about? What happened? And we can do a very high level elevator pitch, but, a lot of realtors and a lot of real estate agents and actually a lot of consumers are worried. Realtors are worried about how this is going to affect their business. And I think we need to get information out there about what it is, what it means, and how it affects people. So let's start off with, what is this settlement agreement even about? And either one of you can take it away, but Victoria, you might be the best.
So initially there was a lawsuit that was filed and there was a judgment that was rendered in favor of the plaintiffs, a judgment that was against NAR, a class action suit. And the judgment was for $1.8 billion. Mm-hmm. Instead of going the appeal route, which I believe NAR did initially appeal, they dropped their appeal and have now entered into settlement negotiations and now a settlement agreement that is proposed. What you're seeing right now is a proposed settlement agreement because it still has to be approved by the judge.
Right.
So what does that mean? Well, that means that everything in this agreement could happen or everything in the agreement could not happen. That's looking at two polar opposite extremes. More likely than not, most of the things that are included in that settlement will be implemented, but we just don't know yet. Mm-hmm. So you might have heard the July 1 date thrown around. I think that's probably a little soon, but I would say at some point in the month of July, we will have definitive, have a definitive settlement that's been reached that's signed by a judge.
Well, and I mean, just to kind of go a few steps back, the whole reason why this lawsuit came up was you basically had, in the state of Missouri, you had real estate agents that would go in to a seller's house and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is how much we're going to sell your house for, and you're going to pay X percent commission. That includes the buyer's agent commission and the listing agent commission. And basically, these sellers are saying, well, we never knew that commissions were negotiable, which in the state of Texas, it's very different. I feel like here, we've always told our clients, at least here at our company, it is always stated that commissions are negotiable, right? And it's kind of like, that's just how we do our business here. But this is how we got into this situation. And so now you're seeing the settlement come about because they're trying to say, well, we didn't know commissions were negotiable, A. B, why do we have to pay a buyer's agent commission is really kind of the gist of how this settlement came about. So a lot of people are frustrated, right? Because some people say, well, why did we even do a settlement? Are they admitting that they did something wrong? Which I'm assuming, yes, they did admit that they did something wrong.
Well, NAR is saying that they are not admitting wrongdoing, that it was just an easier way to come about. But there's a lot of school of thought, like, why did they settle? Because they're leaving some brokerages, up to 80 brokerages, are left out of the settlement. So they are still open to litigation in the future. So NAR is not covering every one of their members or their brokerages. So they're there are people out there wondering still why the settlement. And I think Victoria's right. Legally, it's easier to settle than to keep litigating it and going, keeping it in limbo, unless you're part of the 80 brokerages that aren't going to be covered in the settlement.
Mm-hmm. Well, the cost of litigation is expensive. Mm-hmm. So, and if you look at the numbers, the original judgment was $1.78 billion. So the settlement's really going to be closer to like $118 million, something around those lines. Mm-hmm. So they're paying far less, but also the cost of litigation to continue the appeal. Mm-hmm. So they've got a judgment that's out there. Basically, an order was rendered that was not in their favor. That was the outcome of the initial trial. So they're appealing that. And instead of going through the appeals process, which when you get to the appellate court, it can be the appellate court can agree with the findings of the trial court, and then you can continue an appeal, and you've got to appeal even higher. Then or they could say, you know what, the lower court got this issue wrong. We're going to send this matter back down to the lower court. So basically, what you've just done there is you're creating a cycle.
Right.
So the idea is that you can have a settlement and not necessarily agree or admit fault from a legal perspective. They may not be admitting fault or any wrongdoing, but in the long run, it's obviously less money and less time to reach a settlement agreement after this judgment has been awarded in favor of the plaintiffs, to then have some finality to this matter, for NAR at least, and the brokerages that are included in that.
Well, and I think the uncertainty comes with, okay, let's just take Texas, for example. So for our MLS, which is our multiple listing service, and again, I'm just explaining this so people who don't know what these, acronyms are, they can, be aware of it. But in the MLS, some changes that we are going to see, happen, which again are proposed, but I'm pretty sure they're going to go into effect in August, is that they're going to remove the compensation portion in the MLS. Now, the question is, okay, well, why? So does that mean sellers aren't going to be able to offer a buyer's agent commission? And I think that's where the uncertainty comes from, which I think, yes, and you can, answer this probably in a better way, Victoria, more legal terminology way, I guess. But my take on it is that compensation portion is going to be removed. So when you're looking at a property, you always look at the bottom and it says buyer's agent commission, 2%, 3%. And there's this speculation, right? People think, oh, well, if you don't offer a higher buyer's agent commission, then no one's going to show your property, right? Which you can't say that, right? But it's always been there. So that is going to go away. So now people are going to say, well, how do I know if the seller will offer a buyer's agent commission, which is coming into effect now is a buyer's rep agreement, right? Which you can kind of talk onto this, Victoria. In Texas, we have buyer's rep agreements. In the past, it's always kind of been a brokerage level and between you and your client. You get your client to sell it, that you have an exclusive buyer's rep agreement with them. And you're able to represent them so that they can't go buy a house from someone else and get paid. Clearly, you have an agreement between you and your client. But now we're going to see that those buyer's rep agreements are what? They're going to be required, right? Are they going to have to be sent to the title company? Are they going to have to be, part of the contract? I mean, how do we know, or is that not final yet?
That's a great question. Mm-hmm. But that's part of the problem that we have here. We don't have a final settlement that the judge has signed off on. So it's a lot of speculation. If I were to speculate, I would say, yes, that's going to be across the board. Buyers rep agreements are going to be, you can try to mandate something, but that doesn't, I can say they were going to mandate it, but everyone may not follow that. I think that they're a great tool. Mm-hmm. So, a good example would be an attorney creating an attorney-client relationship with their client. They're going to have some sort of representation agreement.
Right.
So that also creates a fiduciary relationship, not only attorney-client in that situation, but also a fiduciary relationship with a realtor that's in a prospective buyer. Now, is it going to be required to be given to the title company? Well, I don't know. Probably, more likely than not. But I'm hesitant to use the word mandate or require just because, again, this is a proposed settlement that is out there.
Right,
We don't have anything definitive.
Yeah.
Right.
One clear thing that's in the settlement, again, probably will stay in, is that it will be required, and the amount that the agent gets paid will be determined on that buyer's rep agreement and will not change. So you negotiate the amount that the buyer agent will get paid for helping the buyer. And
Right.
even if the seller then later comes back and says, I'll pay you more, it's the agent does not get that higher amount. They get what's agreed upon in that buyer's rep agreement. So that's something really unique and stood out to me when I was reading through it.
Yeah, for sure.
But so, yeah.
And the buyer's rep agreement is basically stating that I'm going to represent the client, but the client has to agree that they will pay me, let's just use numbers, for example, 1.5% of the sales price. And so, Cindy, what you're saying is that if the seller says, hey, listen, I am willing to pay your buyer's agent commission, I can negotiate it in the deal, and I'll pay you a 3%. You're saying that because I got a buyer's rep agreement at a 1.5%, the seller can only pay me 1.5%.
That is the way I read it.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I've taken away from it too. So that's where everyone's just going, oh my gosh, what do we do? Because they also think, a lot of buyer's agents are thinking, oh no, is that going to scare away someone, a buyer, from signing an agreement with me? Because now, not only are they going to have enough money in reserves to pay for a down payment on a home, but now they have to include out of pocket to pay a buyer's agent commission. So that's where I think it's getting a little dicey for agents, and they're worried about the uncertainty of their career, how they're going to make money. And that's where I think it's super important for buyer's agents to show their worth, right?
Yes.
So, Victoria, I know you're a lawyer, and I've had multiple clients say to me, well, I'm just going to have an attorney write the contract. I'm going to find a house that I like, and I'm going to have an attorney write the contract. As a real estate agent myself, the things that I'm saying to them is, okay, I understand that, but do you really think an attorney is going to do all the things that a real estate agent would do to help make sure there's no problems with the property? Because you're an attorney, and yes, you're very knowledgeable and you know what you're doing. But when it comes to buying a house, there's so many things that we are trained as real estate agents that we know we're supposed to do and check, do the checklist of when someone goes under contract, we need to make sure we get an inspection. You schedule an inspection. You're there for the inspection. You go through the seller's disclosure notice. You want to make sure that there are no visible problems with the house that the seller did not disclose. Like, for example, a crack in the window. That's not disclosed in the seller's disclosure notice, and it's a visible flaw in the property. Those are the things. Yes. Those are the things.
Knowing what the fair market price is. Doing a CMA on the property. Attorneys won't be able to do that. There's a lot of ways that you earn your commission as a buyer's agent. That you pay for yourself, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something I've told them. Attorneys, yes, you're valuable, but they're going to charge you by the hour, right?
Right. But it's also too, the idea, well, I'm going to get an attorney to represent me. Well, what kind of attorney are you getting?
Right.
Are you getting a seasoned real estate attorney that has experience in negotiating contracts, has dealt with things like that, writing these contracts, negotiating the terms of the agreement and the sale? Or are you getting an attorney who says, oh yeah, I can do that for you, and is going to charge you a flat fee, and that's the end of their services?
Right.
You're paying for them to write the contract and not necessarily represent you. All those things I think should be considered, because just because a client says, well, you can get an attorney to write it for you. But if that's the route you're taking, you need to get somebody who's knowledgeable in that field and who has that amount of knowledge and experience. You don't want to get somebody whose, experience is in a different field. That's why you use a realtor.
Right. Exactly.
That's their profession.
Well, I was laughing because yesterday I did career day at my daughter's school. And, the whole point is you're supposed to sign up for your daughter's, like, your your kid's class, right? So you can speak to their grade and you get to see your kid. But I ended up getting third grade. My daughter's in first grade. But anyway, so I got to speak to 210 third graders about real estate, what I do, et cetera. But one of the things that a little sweet third grader asked me, which is making me think about why it's important to have a buyer's agent represent you in the sale of a home, is she said, well, we bought our new house and we really wanted to put a pool in, but there was no pool, right? So we wanted to put one in. And, my mom and dad were really sad because, when we went and we talked to a pool person and all that, we found out we couldn't put a pool in because apparently there wasn't enough space. Like, she clearly didn't know, impervious cover. There was,
right.
And I said, well, honey, that's one of the things that we do as real estate agents. If I was representing your mommy and daddy in that sale as their buyer's agent, I would have done my due diligence during the option period and figured out how much impervious cover has already been used on the property. B, can we put a pool in if there is enough impervious cover for them to put one in? Are there any trees we're going to have to remove, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something that I don't think a normal buyer would know to ask, because a lot of people don't even know that there's a 45%, usually 45% impervious cover rule on properties, in the city of Boston. But it was interesting because I felt like right then and there I was explaining the worth of an agent to a third grader. Yeah. But I think it's super important for people to know their worth, which is really cool. I was, just reading about how I think there's an accredited buyer's representative. It's like a designation you can get. And now I think they're offering it for free. It was worth, I think, almost $300, $295. And it's pretty much like going through what you do as a buyer's rep. You are basically getting another crash course that, you've already taken all your courses to be an agent, but you're getting a crash course just in this. And I think it's important now because this is how you're going to explain your worth to a consumer, right? In this sort of market. But I will say from our end in real estate, at least in Texas, commissions have always been negotiable. We have never, ever gone in and said, hey, this is what you're going to pay us, right? We, of course, say, listen, these are all the things we do for you. And this is what I charge, right? These are all the things you get. I do your photos. I do marketing. I do X, Y, and Z. But then, of course, but listen, commissions are negotiable. Okay, great. We work on how much you're going to pay the listing agent. That might scale some of the things that I end up paying for if it's, a bigger cut in my commission. But at the end of the day, it's a very open and fluid conversation. And even in our listing agreements here in Texas that we use, you write what you're going to get paid, right? You write the total commission to be paid through an agent, a seller's agent, and a buyer's agent. But then you can also say, well, if I'm an intermediary, right? That's if I represent both sides of the transaction, and or I have someone else from my brokerage, same brokerage represent, the other side, then the commission, of course, scales down. We'll do it at let's use this for example, 4%. So, in our agreements, you already have that scaling of commissions based on kind of what happens in the transaction.
I really think in Texas, a lot of agents are confused by this lawsuit because we've already had buyer's reps agreements. We've already had really good, solid listing agreements that spell out what the commission is. I cannot imagine one seller being blindsided that they didn't know what the commission structure was going to be because we've just been trained that way. So I think a lot of this feels kind of like an attack on our industry. And for me, I look to the past and, before we had buyer's agreements, right? Single agency. And so what that means is that a buyer agent, real estate agent, represents the buyer. Before that, everyone represented the seller. So even if you are a real estate agent and you are taking a buyer out, your fiduciary duty was to the owner of that home. And so that's where, buyer beware came from. And so I just really think it's par for the course, maybe, with the federal government, if I can throw that in there, that in the 90s, the Federal Trade Commission came in and said, hey, these buyers are not being represented well enough, right? And so they created something called single agency, to where you could go in as a real estate agent and have a buyer's rep agreement. And on there, most of them say that if the listing broker doesn't pay a commission, that you will pay me this certain amount. But when you sign it, then all of a sudden you represent that buyer. And then your fiduciary duty is to them.
Right.
And before that, it wasn't.
Right.
Which is crazy to me. But really, that's what I feel like in my heart, like that this lawsuit or this settlement is taking us back to. It's really taking us backwards, because there are some clear winners in this settlement,
right,
and some clear losers. And to me, the biggest loser are the buyers.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some buyers that can afford to pay a great agent to represent them, and they understand that that's money well spent. But there's going to be buyers, first-time home buyers, people that do not have the money to get good representation, and they're going to be the clear losers in this.
Yeah.
And that's what really bothers me about this
know.
lawsuit. It also, implies, in some of the readings of the documents that I read, it implies that agents would take their buyers to where they're going to get a higher commission. And as we all know, there's code of ethics that agents adhere to. And I really believe in our industry, and that is not something I've ever witnessed or seen or heard. And so I just, part of me, feels real offended by some of the wording in there as well.
Well, the irony is not lost on me that NAR imposes a code of ethics, right? And it's, what is it? Fidelity, competency, integrity. One of was that the three of them? I teach legal 1 and 2, so I'm pulling that out. But you're exactly right. You have a fiduciary duty to your client to represent them, and being a fiduciary, it's not to show all the properties where you as the agent receive the highest commission.
Right.
It's showing the properties that fits the prerequisites and the needs of your buyer.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see how all this is going to play out.
Right.
Again, there's not we don't have a definitive yet, but I mean, we're speculating. I think the general consensus is a lot of the things that are included in that settlement agreement will go into effect.
Right.
But, having a buyer rep agreement is so important.
Intent and some of the wording makes agents sound very unethical. And it's not what I've witnessed on our end. It's just not true. And it's the sole reason that we became, single agencies and what that means, again, is that prior to having a buyer's rep agreement, you did not have that fiduciary duty to your client, to that buyer.
Right.
And all things. The only thing you were required to have is to tell the truth.
Right.
Okay. That's a pretty minimum thing. Like, okay, just not lie to me. But you had no fiduciary duty, so you're not negotiating a price for them. Because your duty was to the seller, who you may have never met before.
Right.
And so it's just, to me, that concept is crazy. But what I feel like is we're moving back to that.
Yeah.
And so I believe in agents. I believe in brokerages. I believe in our industry, and I think we'll figure it out. I think that we may have to become a little bit more nimble and set up programs within each brokerage or somewhere that provide services to these buyers. And again, my heart goes to the people that can afford it, can't come out of pocket, right? They can barely make the down payment. And that's the vast majority of America. Okay?
Yeah.
It may not be who a lot of us work with, clients in Austin or in affluent areas, but that's not who we're supposed to look out for. We're supposed to look out for everyone in this industry. And so that really worries me. And I hope that, someone's looking at that, maybe the Federal Trade Commission, who tried to correct it back in the 90s, might say, "Oh, this is going against what we had in intent back then." So, but I think as people in the industry, kind of shame on us that we didn't educate the public enough to that they know our value.
Right.
And so I think there's lessons to be learned on our end as well. That, hey, this is what we provide. We pay for that commission.
Right.
We earn that.
We earn
right?
it. Yeah.
And I'm entitled now, but we negotiate the price. We negotiate those contracts. We know where the pitfalls are. We're saving you money, and lots of times people don't like to toot their own horns. I know even in the title side, we like to get things done and never let anyone know that there was a giant issue. We just handle it,
you just
right?
handle it.
And maybe that's a lesson to be learned, is that the public needs to understand that it's not just these simple transactions that you can find, a house on the internet and then go purchase it and think that.
Hey, I'm Brandon Sparks with Nautilus Lending. We're a full-service mortgage lender and brokerage based right here in Austin, Texas, but serving not just Texas, Florida, and Tennessee as well. One of the things we're really, really good at is creative financing, and it doesn't matter whether you're a first-time home buyer or a seasoned investor. We have loan programs to facilitate everything legally possible. You can find out more about us at www.nautilus-lending.com. That's www.nautilus-lending.com.
Well, and this is something too I think is interesting, is that people need to understand that buying and selling a home, buying and selling real estate is a big investment, right? Regardless of how expensive the home is or not. You buy a home because your hope is that over X amount of years, you're going to build equity in it. You make money, you sell that house, and then you get to buy either a bigger house or a house in a better area. Kind of like your typical American dream of that, right?
Absolutely. It is the American dream.
It's the American dream. And that is one of the most important decisions someone makes. And that's why it's important to have people who know what they're doing representing both parties. In the sense, if I'm a seller, I want my real estate agent only representing me and looking out for my best interests. And a lot of people are scared that you're going to see these buyers just going directly to the listing agent and say, hey, will you please be an intermediary? Which then, if people don't know what that means you are literally Switzerland. You are neutral. You basically can say now to the person that you've listed the house for, right? That was your, duty to them. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's the offer. They can't ask you advice. They can't say, well, what do you think? How should we negotiate this? Shouldn't we go back? What is your take? You have to be completely neutral. Here's their terms. Let us know what you think is best. We'll submit it to the next, to the other party. And as a seller, if it was me, I would rather say, no, I'm going to offer a buyer's agent commission. I'm going to put it in my, because I'm the one making the proceeds from the home. I would rather add that in there to make sure a buyer has good representation to represent them. Because I also think that could be, to me, a little bit of an issue down the road. And you can answer this. Do you not think that you're going to start seeing lawsuits from the buyer's side?
Exactly. That's why it happened in the 90s, is because people were suing because they thought they were being represented by their agent and they weren't.
Right.
Right. So no. And so do you think that people, like, if you were selling your home, would you be okay with an intermediary, or would you just say, like, let them just handle it themselves? Like, I want you to try to get the best deal for me. It's up to them to go figure out if they need an agent.
Yeah. And there's some people that will say, yeah, of course, because, we're going to negotiate the commission down even more because you're going to help be an intermediary and you're going to represent both sides. So to them, they think, oh, great. I'm only having to pay a total of, again, for the sake of conversation, use a number, 4%.
Right.
Because I have one agent negotiating the contract for both parties. I don't know. I mean, we, here at our company, at Engel and Volkers, we do intermediaries. Like we will do an intermediary, but it's usually my very seasoned agents. And of course, we get written approval from the seller. I mean, it's very rare that we do it, but we still do it, right? But I am not the biggest fan of intermediary. I will say that. I'm not. I think each person needs someone to look for their best interest. Because like I said, this is a huge investment. And people for all times, I mean, this is why we call ourselves real estate advisors at Engel and Volkers, because just like if you were investing money, you have a financial advisor helping you, telling you, hey, put your money here, open a Roth IRA, open a 529 for your kid's college fund so that when your kid turns 18, you're not scrambling to pay for college. They're giving you the right advice. They're helping manage your money. That's why you have a financial advisor, and that's why you pay them a percentage of what you make in those investments, right? It's the same concept with a real estate agent, AKA is why we call ourselves real estate advisors, because we're advising them on making the best purchase for them and their family. So I think a lot of this is going to be now people are going to have to know their worth and be able to explain their value, which is why I think this is great. A lot of people are going to start getting that, accredited buyer's representative designation, because I think it's going to help teach them. This is how you explain your worth now, because now it's, under question, right? And it's under speculation. But what is something, Victoria, would you say from us? Let's say now, we are sellers of all our listings that we have. We're really more predominantly a listing company here, but we help tons of buyers as well. But to our sellers, what do you think would be the right wording for now, right? Because nothing's set in stone. Our sellers are asking, so I don't have to pay a buyer's agent commission now? And what would you respond to them? Because I know what we've been saying, and it's been we're keeping it very PC and very gentle, but for now, this is kind of what we've said, and you can tell me if you would change it or tweak it. But we've gone to our sellers and said, listen, commissions have always been negotiable. You can pay a buyer's agent anything you can pay them any percent you want. And you don't have to pay them anything, but I want you to really think about how this may affect the sale of your home, right? How you think it will affect people showing your house, the marketing of your property, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that is a very PC response to a seller to explain to them, hey?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's you want to tread lightly on all of it right now. But yes, I think that's a good general approach, very PC, puts all the information out there. I'm not sure I would tweak it to make it any, to change anything to make it any better.
You're kind of putting it on the seller, right? You're saying, listen, this is your decision. But you need to just think how it's going to potentially affect how we get your home sold, essentially. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to pitch it to them and explain it to them.
Yeah, just because there's nothing definitive that you can give them right now. And I will say I don't think we have seen a huge change, right? I'm not seeing sellers slashing buyer's agent commission. You've always seen in the MLS, which of course this little area of what a buyer's agent commission is going to be is going to go away. But for now, we're seeing 2%. We're seeing 2.5%. We've seen that before this NAR settlement agreement has even come out. Because again, in Texas, commissions have always been negotiable for us. So I haven't really seen a huge difference in that. I've actually even seen a lot more buyer's agent incentives. I'm seeing, offering a 3.5% buyer's agent commission on homes. I mean, builders, of course, have always offered a nice 4% buyer's agent commission, but I am seeing a little bit more of that, of an incentive, which is really nice. But, going forward with that moving away from the MLS, do you think in the remarks people can put buyer's agent commission negotiable?
I don't think so.
Not in the MLS.
Okay.
MLS, you cannot have it anywhere. Cannot be hidden, cannot be in, see documents, see anything. But the funny part is it seems to be worded that you can put commission in off-market websites. So let's say
like
CoStar or
ALN,
yes,
which is Austin Luxury Network
or
here,
you know Zillow, like throwing it out there. So a place where a buyer could go and look for properties off, you know, the MLS, right? There, it can be in there. So why? My question is, why is it worded that way? To me, there's always an intent behind stuff. And again, this is just we don't know how it's going to settle out. But
Right.
Does the Department of Justice want the MLS to go away? If they're making it to where brokerages can go and use a different resource and can put commissions on there. And the way it's worded, it seems to be that you can also within your own website and your own listings can put commission within, like, let's say Engel and Vogler's website with people. So they're not completely taking it away. They're just taking it away from the MLSs.
And that's as the settlement stands right now.
Yeah, exactly.
The proposed settlement.
Got it.
Again, that could be something that could change. Like that's exactly what we started off by saying today. It's proposed. You've got two polar opposite things can happen. Everything in that settlement can be signed and it can go all according to plan. Okay, or absolutely none of it. Or some things could stand, some things could be removed, or some things could be added. That's the thing. That's what we don't know. So what we're talking about today is all hypothetical based upon
how it reads
right now.
Yeah,
right.
And you know how a lay person, a non-attorney, reads it, right?
Exactly.
But that's what it kind of seems to be, is that, you know, as long as it's not on the MLS anywhere.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden, you know, they're going to have to police the MLS, obviously.
Well, and I am
all that kind of
assuming
thing.
our residential listing agreements are going to change as well, because as it stands right now, you just have the total commission paid, right? Or they may stay the same, and that's a total commission paid. Is it in the listing agreement that it can say seller offers X% to a buyer's agent? That's the thing that scares
the wording
people.
in there is that it must be extremely clear what the commissions are, both on the listing and on the buyer side.
And that they're fully negotiable.
Yes.
That was the biggest thing. For other states, that wasn't. Texas hasn't ever really had a problem with that. But part of the settlement is it's making very clear, and that's why a lot of us here in Texas are kind of scratching our heads of, hey, we've been doing this. It's not, it's not anything new.
Yeah. But I think too, that's the fear with buyer's agents is, you know, again, it's like the game of telephone. They're hearing all the grumblings because, like you said, nothing is set in stone. But buyer's agents are really scared that they're not going to allow sellers to offer a buyer's agent commission, which I don't think they can. I don't think you can do that. I think the seller can offer a concession. They can do this, you know, in a deal.
I don't think that's in any of the wording.
Not that I've seen.
You're not allowed to add it. It's just that where it is publicized, and
that's the biggest thing,
it's
just
clear that it's negotiable, right? And then what I find really odd is that you are required to have the buyer's rep agreement where the commission is also clear, whether it comes from the buyer themselves or happens to come from the listing. It's a certain amount or a certain percentage, and that's completely clear. And it won't change according to what the listing agreement says.
Yeah. And that's going to be also a different thing because, like you said, it's going to have to be required, probably. And in the past, buyer's rep agreements, we've always encouraged our agents to get buyer's rep agreement because it's a protection for them, because it's a lot of work. You could show a buyer 50 properties and they end up not buying one.
Right.
And it's time, it's gas, it's, you know, time is money. So it's a lot of work, right?
And also without one, even currently without one, you really don't represent them and their fiduciary interest until you have one.
A buyer's rep agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
It then defaults back to that sub agency with the listing agreement. So it's the buyer's rep agreement has always been very important.
It has been, yes. It's just never been required. It's always been between the real estate agent and their client, and it's, in their documents, but we've never had to submit it to title or submit it, part of the listing or anything, or part of the offer.
Yeah.
So I think that's also going to be another change that people are going to have to probably get used to. And I think that it's going to impact our industry, but I think a lot of people are blowing it, I think, out of proportion, because we've always seen commissions, offered at different prices.
And there's also been things that have happened in the industry, and that we've always rebounded and adjusted, and new opportunities.
Yeah, a disruptor. We always have disruptors.
There's always
in the
disruptors,
industry,
right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's something for brokers to think about, is how can we pivot and provide different services, create this as an opportunity for our agents, and, maybe think about, just, creating a different division for buyers. But one thing I do hope as an industry is that we educate the public more.
I agree. I really do agree on that one.
I think some of this hysteria, though, has come from large news outlets or newspapers. You've got like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, publishing articles that they're not publishing articles that are specific to Texas. They are covering this story as it applies across the board. Right. And so, there may be more panic or hysteria in other states that may be well deserved. I don't see that necessarily here, that there should be a lot of panic. Certainly now that we don't have a definitive answer, but even when we do get one, it's a change, and we'll adapt and overcome and move forward as a real estate community as a whole, and keep on conducting business as usual.
Right. No, for sure.
Yeah, most of the news is just incorrect, or
right,
blowing it out of proportion. Like now there's going to be, millions of dollars, billions of dollars of that would have been paid in commission now flowing into the market, and I don't know what they're talking about. Like, it's like
sometimes you just have to you got to actually do some fact finding yourself.
Stop it.
But do you think, Victoria, that a lot of brokerages are going to have to write some sort of disclosure in addition to the way maybe some of the contracts are, and some of the listing agreements are rewritten? Do you think they're going to have to go a step above and get an attorney to say, hey, listen, we're going to just cover our basis and have a disclosure that says, I understand that all the things that have been going on in this NAR settlement, right? Like high level, I understand that commissions are negotiable. This has been discussed, blah, 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 blah. Et cetera, et cetera.
Potentially, I think we should probably wait and see how Trek is going to address it as well.
Right.
Potentially, an additional disclosure probably wouldn't be a bad thing talking from just a strictly legal standpoint, not a legal title standpoint. Disclosures aren't a bad thing. The more you're disclosing, the more you're putting out there up front that the party signing the agreement is acknowledging this information. I think that's a good thing, but I think we need to sit tight on really changing anything immediately, because we don't know how Trek's going to respond, or even Texas Realtors, exactly what's going to come down the pipe. As soon as the settlement is definitive and we have a signed settlement that is agreed upon by the judge in July, I think then that's when we start more discussions of,
this
exactly
is
what was included, what was taken out, what was included but changed, and what was added. And then how does that apply to us, the state of Texas, and how we were conducting our business here as opposed to other places. I don't think we will have as many large changes to the way we're conducting business. I think it might be small, maybe adding disclosures. Certainly, I think there will be a lot stronger emphasis on buyer representation agreements. I think they're a great thing. I think you should have one.
I think you should too.
Just from a strictly legal perspective.
Absolutely.
Right. 100%. Yeah, and like you said, the biggest takeaways from this whole NAR settlement is, let's not freak out yet, because nothing has been decided. Nothing is set in stone. I would say, too, the biggest thing is, if you're a buyer's agent, get a buyer's rep agreement, right? Just get a buyer's rep agreement signed, Always, always, always. I would say third, and y'all can add on to this, but just kind of high level things. Third is, I think, disclose. Make sure like you have every disclosure you can signed. Make sure everything's in writing, that there's no confusion, that, you know, commissions were discussed and that we negotiated it and we agreed upon this price, right? I think for now, right? If people are worried, well, what do we do now? What do we do now? Since we don't really have a clear direction of what we're supposed to do. Also, if you have listings, educate your sellers, right? Explain to them what's going on. Again, that we don't have anything definitive, but commissions are always negotiable. And it's up to you to decide what you want to do, you know, on that buyer's agent side. But also as a buyer's agent, educate people on your worth, right? And your value in this. And I think that's going to be probably the biggest takeaways from this right now. And I don't think they need to freak out. I don't think they need to worry that, you know, their career is going to be cut, you know, because of this settlement. I think that's like the biggest fear of the unknown right now. And I've seen a few agents, you know, let their license go inactive because they were so scared of what would happen, because I guess they were either newer agents or represented more buyers.
Really?
Than sellers.
Wow. Just because of this?
A couple. Yeah.
Okay.
Some people got a little terrified of it, you know?
It's going to be okay.
I know.
It's going to be all right.
I think it's going to be fine too. And I think what people don't understand is that buyers will eventually turn into your sellers. So I always tell people, don't freak out about this. If you've been a heavy buyer's agent, those will hopefully turn into sellers, right? And you'll be more on the listing side of that. But I just think people are really worried about what this is going to do for their career.
Yeah.
And people not knowing, like the consumers not knowing. I will say I've done quite a few open houses recently, and a lot of people will come in without a realtor, or so they say, or they don't disclose if they have a realtor. Clearly, we always ask if they're working with an agent. And they keep asking, well, I can't afford a buyer's agent. And our response is, okay, well, there's nothing has been, set in stone yet. The seller on this property is offering a buyer's agent commission. So again, I think it's just education in that aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, if y'all have anything else to add of, hey, this is kind of the takeaway. These are the high level things. And, we'll have to won't know until we know.
It's good that you have already heard that, because I felt that was going to be the case with the buyers. Like, I can't afford it. And so I think that's an opportunity, is maybe in our industry to create an arm, maybe in brokerages, that focuses in on educating those buyers and looking for off-market ways, if that stays in that settlement, to advertise listings where people can see that there is a, commission offer to the buyer's agent. Right. So those things will crop up. It's going to take a second, because, we don't know exactly how it's going to be worded, but the industry will sort it out.
Yeah.
There's really smart people in this industry, and we'll sort it out. I just want to make sure that the people that need the representation know that they're going to get it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sellers are still going to, however they can, offer something, because it is the most important thing for them to sell that home, right? That's where their equity is. If they want to sell it, they may have to think about, if I want to get this sold, what do I need to do?
Yeah, I think it'll be a distinction between people who are just out there fishing for a buyer and motivated sellers.
Right. That is a very good point. Yeah.
And I really like the way that you've explained it to buyers agents who are kind of, leery about it. Well, as representing a buyer, you in hopes that you're showing your worth and proving your value to then for that transaction, because eventually they'll become your sellers.
Right.
So I think that's a great, exactly.
Right?
Vice versa.
Like most people are buyers and then sellers, or sellers and
exactly.
And so it affects them on both ends. It's always just your perspective at the time. You hear people, in the industry, commissions will go down. I can make more money off the property, but then you're also going to buy a house.
Yeah.
Usually you're going to buy. Yeah. So, think about it on both of those sides.
Both of those sides. Yeah. Well, and this is something I always tell a seller is, listen, part of something is better than nothing. So like if you're going to make $300,000 on your house and you have to pay X% in commissions, but let's say you don't get your house sold because you have no one representing you, then you get $0 versus 280 versus the 300,000.
And
you
holding
have to
costs,
look at it,
right? I mean, we've got holding costs that's
Yeah.
going on. So it's just educating them, which maybe we need to do better.
I agree. I think that's probably the biggest thing is educating the consumer about the value of using a real estate agent to sell and to buy a property. Because like I said, it's the biggest investment somebody will make. And you want to make sure you check all your boxes when you're going through that transaction, because there's nothing more costly than missing something huge.
Right.
In whether it's in an inspection report or a visible defect in the house or flaw in the house that ends up costing your client a lot of money.
Right.
Because then again, it's going to reflect on you and it's money out of their pocket.
It's developing that trust relationship there, right? It's that interpersonal relationship that builds personal equity and trust.
Right. 100%. Well, you guys, this was so awesome. Thank you again, Capital Title. You guys are awesome. Victoria and Cindy, I so appreciate y'all's expertise. And I think that this is going to be really helpful for people, not just real estate agents, but also consumers to kind of understand a little bit more about what's going on, give some peace, hopefully, and calm, and let people understand that there is a worth in using a real estate agent.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So,
well, thank you for having us
so
today.
much.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been
It was
great.
great.
Yeah, thank y'all.